God gave me a word when on my first time landing in East Africa, that there will come a day when the church will dominate the continent of Africa. That day has come and begun to dawn. The Crusades will remain, but they will not be the dominant force. The Crusades will still reach the lost and demonstrate the power of God, but the day of discipleship has come, and the strength of the local church has come to this continent. No longer is the world's largest church in the southeast part of Asia. It now resides on the continent of Africa, with over 1 million members in one church in West Africa. No longer do we go to Cho to learn how to grow a church. We come to Africa to learn how to grow a church that big. I was just in West Africa, and they're building a new building, and they're building it according to miles, not seats. The American mind can't understand that. Maybe the African mind can. They're building it like a 4-mile building, how they spread it out. And I said, I don't understand. How many seats is that? We don't measure in seats anymore. We measure by miles and buildings. Welcome to Africa. The land of the great promise is going to happen here. It is good to be with the bishops and all my other good friends to see you. Take us to come all the way halfway around the world to say hi to each other. It's very sad we can't learn how to say hi when we live in the same city. You're going to get to heaven one day and meet your neighbor and didn't realize they were a Christian because you never said hi to them. Good morning, everybody. I have a unique personality. You either love me or you hate me, but you won't be neutral. When I preached my first sermon at 12 and a half, it was in my grandparents' Assemblies of God country church in North Carolina. And I have never known a public job. I've worked for Christ since I was a little boy. I gave him my life and I never took it back. Some negotiate through the seasons of human life and say, I will work for you like this during this season, but when it's time for me to marry, I must do this. Or when my children come, I must do that. When I buy a house, I must do this. It's amazing how the excuses we come up with to tell Jesus why we didn't fulfill our high call and lived in our medium or low call for the remainder of our life. What most men call the high calling could be a residential place if they would learn how to abide there and keep all stupid peoples and wrong peoples out of their fray of influence. For in your life, you can live in the height of your call, where most people call it a visitation. It could be your habitation. That's the difference between a good preacher and what I would call a general. One that remained in their high call and never came out, no matter who was around them or the ups and downs of their private life. They remained there. While I'm with you, I hope to impregnate your spirit with the ability to remain in the height of your call and to disdain everything below it for the remainder of your life. What you do not dislike, you'll eventually end up walking with, and some things you'll marry. And when you marry a wrong path, trouble and trials come that I won't even call the devil's fault. You opened the door, he just walked in. I have received a duty from the Lord when I was a teenager. He said, write books and I will sell them for you. That's called a good deal. That's why every publisher wants me, but they can't have me. I've sold about 16 million books in English. That's not a lot compared to others. I plan to write about 200 books before I'm dead. The power of a book is that after I'm gone, I keep talking and keep speaking. A power of a book, what took a man 10 years to learn, you can buy for $10. And if you'll actually read it, you can learn what took him 10 years in an hour and change your life. When you walk and buy a Kenneth Hagin book, what took him 15 years to learn about faith, you can learn in 20 minutes by reading one of his smaller books. So if you're going to be great, you must be a reader. If you don't read, you remain at the level of intelligence that only experience can give you, not the combination of experience and academic understanding. Pentecostals are the greatest in experiential knowledge, but they got to learn how to read so they can actually talk about what they experienced properly. Good morning, everybody. This is just my introduction. I don't see the clock. Oh, there it is. I didn't make sure what time it is. And so I have written so far 80 books. Have you read all 80 yet? How many books have you read? 5 books? Somebody said 5. God help your intelligence. I've read, they tell me, about 14,000 books so far in my life. Now, some are small, so I have to be honest. Pentecostals don't write big books. They usually write small books. You have to go to the Baptist and the Methodist to get the bigger books. When you're Pentecostal, they're like that. But I brought some of my books back there, and I'll mention them to you for a moment. I write 3 kinds of books. I write Christian teaching, I write Christian history, revival history, and I bring old books back into print that should have been out of print. Just because some books don't sell as much should not mean their availability should be removed from the hunger of a person's soul at a different time in their life. And so one of the great men that I wish would have wrote more, but back then African Americans didn't write much. They don't do much of that now either. And I make that comment because I've been trying to write a God's General's book on Africa for 20 years, and I can't do it. Do you want to know why? You don't write. The African and the African American does not write. Now, that's why they'll say that Jesus is the white man's God, and because everything they write comes from the white man's hand. Well, because you're an oral tradition, but it's time that you record the oral tradition so it can go onto paper, so that the stories of your ancestors of faith can be told to the next generation and build an identity that makes them be stronger and more confident to conquer this continent the right way. So be a writer. Daddy Seymour, ever heard of William Seymour of Azusa Street? God chose a black man when in my country he was the lowest of all humans. He had just received their freedom 50-some years before by our president. And society was still not liking him. And God touched him and sent him to a Bible school in Texas, where he had to sit on the outside of the classroom because the laws in my country at that time would not permit a white man and a black man to have been in the same room. And the Bible college president, Brother Parham, wanted him in the room but didn't want the government to shut down his school. So they had to think what to do. They said, well, we'll leave the door open and you can sit in the hallway and hear the lecture. Or if it gets too hot, you can sit out under the window and hear it that way. And that's the way the founder of the Pentecostal movement went to Bible school. His way of moving across the country was very little because he had no money. He graduated that year from the Bible school, and he was the first guy to get an invite to preach out of that class, to go to L.A. He goes to L.A. off the offerings of the students of him by the train ticket and ends up founding the worldwide Pentecostal revival called Azusa Street. Blind in one eye, uneducated, his parents were slaves when he was born. Becomes one of the top, most influential men of the world. It doesn't matter what men say about you, it's what God says. I put together a little book of all of his sermons. Now that's all the sermons we have of Daddy Seymour. That's called a shame. There should be 2 or 3 volumes. But they didn't write, so please write. Can you say amen? Amen. Are you happy? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. I think I should preach now. That's why you flew me over here, right? You sure are quiet now. Are you scared of my personality? I got like this because I was raised around blunt people. My spiritual father was Lester Summerall, and my grandmother was much like him. And they could, I miss them because they could answer a young man's question with a half a phrase. You sit in front of them and talk to them for 30 minutes, and they go, are you done yet? And you talk another 10 minutes because you're stupid. And then I finally said, yes, I'm done. And he gives you a half a sentence that solves all the problem of a 45-minute declaration of your issue. I miss people that can solve problems that fast. Good morning, everybody. Are you really ready? I want to talk to you from the book of Hebrews, the 10th chapter, and we're going to journey for a few moments. I've had the honor of being around the greatest people of our lifetime, all over the world. You can be great, not be American. Did you know that? You don't have to come to America to be great. You can be great right here. I don't know why everybody thinks, I got to go to America. Some of you come to America, you pastor a church of 10,000 here, and you can't get 50 people in my country to be faithful to you. Called wrong place. Go home. Just visit my country and help us, but go home. Good morning, everybody. I hope you invite me back next year. We live this Christian life by a substance called faith. In Hebrews 10 and 38, now the just live by this thing called faith. Underline that phrase in your Bible, the just live by faith. We don't live by music. We don't live by fame. We don't live by buildings. We don't live by these things that we have that are nice. But we live and survive and overcome by this wonderful thing called faith. The just live by it. If you live by your money, you're not in faith. If you live by your fame, you're not living by faith. Many preachers, their faith makes them famous, and then their fame kills them at the height of their success. Fame is a commodity that is a byproduct of your passionate obedience. It is not a part of your identity. Fame is a byproduct of your passionate obedience. It is not a part of your identity as a man or a woman or a man or a woman of God. If you thrive for fame, you should go to Hollywood and be a star. That's not going to work inside the kingdom. I've known many Christian stars, and most of them are backslidden or dead because they didn't know how to live right. We live by faith. We don't visit it. It is what we breathe on. It's how we overcome. It's how we got saved. It's how we hear God's voice. It's how we walk on water. When everybody around us goes, don't get out of the boat. And you get out of the boat and walk to the other side by faith. In Hebrews 11, another passage you'll be familiar with, Hebrews 11:6, it says this verse. Without faith, it is exactly or tremendously impossible to make God happy. I think if you want to make God happy, you might want to find out what puts a smile on his face and do that. Not what puts a smile on your neighbor's face or the guy across the street's face, but God's face. Does God smile when he sees you because he can feel and hear faith rise up from you? Without faith, it is impossible to get God to smile in your direction. For he that comes to God, not everybody comes to God. Some people don't want to get close to God because they don't want their 5-year life plan to blow up. They don't want the way they constructed their life to change. It's sad they're using the intelligence of God to remain carnal their whole life with a Christian name tag upon them. You must believe that he is. And, I like this next part, that God is a responder. He responds to people that live by faith. Not every human lives a life of faith. Most Christians live with an event of faith in their life. Evan Roberts, the great Welsh revivalist, only had 2 years, 2.5, I'll be kind, of greatness out of his life. That was in 1900, 2, 3, and 4. He died in 1951. Alone, not knowing why he was born, he wrote in his journal. He had an event of faith in his life. He did not live the life of faith. Most of us get excited over an event, a great miracle, a great edifice, a great something. And then we sit for the rest of our lives remembering that moment where faith did the impossible and God came through in a spectacular manner. And that one event, that one moment out of 80 or 90 years, you've lived remembering what could have been every single year of your life. I knew Oral Roberts since I was a baby. The reason why we admire Brother Roberts is because he lived a life of faith. He didn't just pioneer Christian TV. He lived a whole life. I was telling the story this morning. He came to my church once to preach. And he was there a little bit early because he was in my office where I could get there, and the ushers came and said, Dr. Roberts is in your office. I said, he's a half an hour early. He says, well, I don't know, but he's there. So I ran up to my office, and there Brother Roberts was sitting there by himself, and I said, good morning. I said, good. He said, good morning back. I sat down, and he looked a little tired to me. And I said, Brother Roberts, you know, you've done so much for the world and for the Pentecostal church. You pioneered Christian TV, the healing message. You built the university built on the authority of the Holy Spirit and the Word, and you combined prayer and medicine. You kept the gospel message going forward that God's a good God, the devil's a bad devil. Expect a miracle. Sow a seed and reap a harvest. And all the things you've done, and now at this time in your life, you know, all of us young pastors would be thrilled if you just come and sit in our office and talk to us and preach a great sermon and lay hands on us, and we would give you all of our money to say thank you because you deserve it. I thought those would be nice words that he would be excited to hear. He said, I'm not dead yet. I said, well, I didn't mean to die, and please don't die in my office. I don't want to be the place where Oral Roberts dies. That's not a good memory at all. He said, well, he looked at me again and he said, you know, my holiday doesn't start until I get to the other side. While I'm on earth, I work. I wonder what's in you. Are you working to the point of finding natural luxury, natural ease? Faith likes projects. Faith likes conquering. Faith likes doing things that said could not be done. If your faith is not a project, then your faith is boring. And it's your own dumb fault. Especially if you come to this church. You can't sit in this building and don't think faith works. Look at it. Everything here was built by a woman. Take that, Africa. You have a problem with women preachers? There's one right there. I've been in a lot of churches, but men can't build this nice building. Mom Teresa can. I like women. I like women preachers. See, well, I don't like women preachers. Well, I have a prophecy for you. They're multiplying, and they're not going to go away. So you, Africa, you better get ready for more people like Mom coming all over the continent. Whether you like it or not, they're coming. And if you're not careful, they'll outdo every man. Why, you think you're all that. God does not work according to gender. He works according to heart condition and faith that is released. There's one man that I would like to interview when I get to heaven. And that's the man called Abraham. Abraham is probably the most famous man that had ever lived on this earth. Him and Christ are probably the most popular ones. Abraham is the father of faith for 3 world religions. The Jewish people look to Abraham for their faith example. The Muslim community of 1 billion plus look to Abraham as the example of their faith. And we, the Christian family, look to Abraham too as the father and as the example of our faith. No other person in history can claim that position but one man, Abraham. Before him, there was not a great example of faith. His story shows up in the first book of the Bible, not the middle or the last. He predates so many things and shows us what faith is like. Abraham created a new dispensation, and we're just trying to govern a revival, let alone a dispensation. Think that your life would define a whole element of time called the dispensation of promise. I'm just glad you buy my books. But Abraham created and led a whole new dispensation. I would like to sit with him and ask him one question. What is faith? How did you live the life of faith? If he was sitting here today and he would look out at you, he would start his story along these lines. You want to know what faith is. You admire how I've lived. He would say, first is, faith is to hear God's voice among all the voices that are yelling at you every single day. My life began in a city where my parents were pagans. They made idols in their backyard and sold them in their front yard. One afternoon I was walking and I heard a voice I never heard before. He said, get up and leave your family, this city, and everybody around you, and do it now. Many of you sitting here and watching me, you've heard God, but that's all you've ever done is hear. That's the beginning of the life of faith, not the ending. Most of us live prophetically in the ability to hear what God is saying. I'm done hearing, I want to do. The day of doing has to come to this generation, not just prophetic hearing forever. We have prophesied ourselves into blessing and sometimes into weirdness. The day of just the utterance is coming quickly to a close, and the day of great doing has come to our generation as our first generational step. He left status in his city. He had a home. He had family. He was married. What is faith, Abraham? It's the ability to tell your wife, we're leaving, and she got excited about it. When she asked, where are we going? I don't know, but we're going that way. How do you know when we get there? I'll know when we get there. Until then, we keep walking. And somehow, Mrs. Abraham said, okay. What is faith? It's that substance in you that gives you peace with the unknown, and so big it rolls over and does the same thing for your wife. Where the oneness is not divided by spirit and carnality. He said to his wife, we're going to leave. They just bought a house. You can't leave, we just bought a house. We just bought a new car. I had a Bible college for over 10 years. And people came to me from all over the world to be trained, and then I shipped them and paid for it. For them and their wife and kids to go to the foreign field for at least a year. That's what prosperity's for, to ship people, not to herd up things. And it's amazing how many would come to me. I feel called to Africa. I feel called to China. I feel called to South America. And then they got married. And they forgot Africa. They forgot China. They forgot South America. And as pastor, I have to ask them, what about the call? Pastor, I'm married. So? I always look at them like this. I said, when you stand before Jesus and ask you for your African harvest that never got anywhere, he asked for your South American harvest you never collected, you're going to tell him, Jesus, I got married. Is that really going to work on the day of judgment and reward? You might want to rehearse these moments because they're coming. When you stand before Christ and he looks at you and goes, welcome, let's review your life. I bought a car. Really? We'll sell the car and buy a ticket. See, that's the difference between wannabes and those that are. What is faith, Abraham? He said it's the ability to do what you were told to do. Most Christians only live in the hearing of God's command and hardly ever fulfill that which God told them to do. They live in mediocre duties. They live in casualness where they're friends with their flowing words make it seem like you're doing something big, but in your belly, the great commission of your life, you've not ever visited but once or twice. And that's why you live around low-level producers, because you look good when you do your false comparison to them. What is faith, Abraham? It's the ability to leave the city you've known, the house you bought, the car you drive, to an unknown place that you have to get there without a map. And your wife goes with you. In my generation, divorce has become a very casual thing. I'm not here to judge, but I'm here to encourage that we revitalize that covenant. And then we live with such faith that can carry our wife with us, our children with us, from the demanding, seductive addictions of our culture into the greatness of the high call. He got up and left everything he knew and headed out of the city, and another family member came with him named Lot. Not everybody's supposed to go with you. Some of them you're supposed to say, go away, you crazy thing. Tell them to leave you alone. Go back home and find your own life. But Lot came along Abraham and said, can I come? I want to go. I want to go. He said, sure. Faith, excitement will bring others along with you too. As soon as they left town, Abraham said, I got rich. It's amazing that a poor man can start following God, and in a moment of time, he goes from poor to rich. In the next chapter of the life of Abraham, the 13th chapter of Genesis, it says that, verse 2, Abraham was very rich. Now that's better than just being rich. I like the adjective, very rich. If it's in the Bible, go for it. He wasn't just surviving, he was very rich. See, Brother Roberts, are you a prosperity preacher? Yes. Let there be no doubt about it. If I don't preach prosperity, then I must preach broke and debt. And if I touch you, you go broke. Do you want that kind of anointing? You better be careful what you resist. It's amazing. And you don't believe in prosperity, then that means you believe in debt. Enjoy it. I'm not going that way. A drunk drug addict has more sense than sober Christians. A drunk drug addict knows being rich is better than being poor. Good morning. Are you enjoying it? I'll preach myself happy on that point right there. I've got happy. He got very rich in three things: cattle, silver, and gold. Now, the only one that I want there is the gold one. And the silver one, I'll take those two. Cows, just eating. I'm a city guy. I don't understand cows, I understand steak. That's my existence with the life of a cow. My cousins raise cows and chickens and pigs and those things. They're farmers. When I go there, they get so excited over 30,000 chickens outside their backyard. I thought, have you smelt 30,000 chickens? Your nose dies and doesn't come back for weeks. Then you go back on the far part of his land, he's got about 7,000 hogs. Now your nose just dies for life at that moment. But he's excited over every pig and every chicken. He knows what they're going to make him in money. God bless him, I'll give him my cows. I'll take his silver. But God made him wealthy in the currency of his day. He'll make you wealthy when you live by faith in the currency of our day. Living by faith does not mean you live broke. Abraham would say, I live by faith, and when I left Ur of Chaldees, I thought I would have nothing. But within a few months, I was wealthy with cows, silver, and gold. I was being blessed by living by faith. And the blessing of Abraham was so strong, the overflow came over on Lot. And Lot began to hire people to help him with his cows. And then the employees of Abraham and Lot got in a fuss. Always remember, the fussing starts out there on the outskirts of your employees and your staff and tries to find the way to your heart to destroy you. So the man of faith, the man of greatness, came to Lot and said, we have a problem in our sphere. Your employees and my employees are arguing all the time because we're both so wealthy, our cows are eating each other's grass and drinking too much of each other's water. And they're fighting and hitting and they're arguing, and I didn't come out here to live by faith, to live in a bunch of staff arguments. Yeah, about 4 of you got that point. That's why some churches can't grow. You should fire every one of your staff and start over. All they do is argue over the stuff now and the titles now, not the thrill of conquering a mountain. Fire all those lazy palace dwellers and get some herdsmen back in there to help you build. And he said, Lot, let's solve it this way. You make first choice. You do first choice. If you go north, I'll go south. If you take this river, I'll take that little stream. You go first. What is faith, Abraham? It's the ability to give somebody else first choice. The ability to give an undeserving human first choice. What is faith, Abraham? It is believing that God can breathe on your leftovers and make something great come out of them. You know, my ministry could be called the leftover ministry. Most of what I've done in my life, I didn't want to do. I did because I was asked to do it. I went places other men did not want to go. That's why I've been to 127 countries. I didn't go for the thrill. I had that in the first 5 years, and the thrill was over. I've been in the best planes, the best hotels. I've been in the worst planes and the worst hotels. I ate the best food. I ate some things. I didn't know what I ate, but I ate it. What is faith, Abraham? It's the ability to believe God can look at your leftovers and he can breathe on them and make something great come out of it. Never complain what's been given you. Let God breathe on it like he did Abraham. Lot took the best. Abraham took what was left. And when Lot departed, God started speaking. It's amazing when you get rid of the wrong people, how your hearing gets better. Just a thought for you. What is faith, Abraham? It's the ability not to complain when they take all the best and leave you with the rest. When I get to heaven, I want to interview Lot. Because Lot is one of those people that intrigues me because he's so stupid. You know, stupidity is interesting to watch. It's better than a movie. Watching stupid people act smart is better than cartoons. Here Lot is prospering so much that his employees are fighting with Abraham. He has all these cows, all this wealth, and the next place he shows up, there's not a cow or an employee. I want to ask the question, what happened to the cows? Isn't that why we left? Is that not why you and me are no longer walking together? And in the next chapter, there's not one stinking cow left to Lot's name. And not one employee is left. Called dumb man. Now, if I happened to have been Lot, here's what I would have done. I would have went over to Abraham and said, listen, I was stuck in Ur of Chaldees in an apartment, just existing. I joined your faith journey and I got rich. And I like it, but I'm not that smart. Let me sell some cows and get rid of some employees that I can stay with you. It's amazing how many of you don't know where their blessing comes from and how it comes. How does your blessing come to you? How does the blessing of God flow from heaven into your life, into your church? How does your blessing flow? Lot did not know. He thought he had it all by himself. I'm rich, I'm great, I'm famous. No, you're the shadow of the man that has it. You don't have it yet. Many a young man and one woman will not remain long enough to get the principle by which they live by into their life that they can function alone gloriously. What is faith, Abraham? The ability to hear that Lot now is in jail. He's now lost his cows, don't have an employee. Now he's a prisoner of a war. And news hits Abraham. What is faith? You build the first army known to the earth. He said, I heard that they took Lot, crazy boy, but he's still family. I took my 318 soldiers, made soldiers out of them. What is faith? To take an ordinary guy who serves him tea and makes him a military general. The faith to see in somebody while they don't see themselves and pull it out and train it to produce fruit that remains against all environments. This is the life of faith. And then to go down and bring the man that caused trouble, who can't even govern himself, out of prison, because that's the right thing to do. And he's not done. That's just the first 3 chapters of his life. We have the rest of it. Now, he could have stopped there and lived the rest of his life on the memory of the departure and the wealth. He could live the rest of his life on the memory of walking the land, the length, the breadth of it, hearing the promise. He could live his whole life in the first few accomplishments of faith, where most people live. I remember when. Oh, shut up. Shut thy mouth, or somebody should slap it. But that's what I hear all the time. Now, I'm a world historian. If anybody should say, I remember when, it's me. When I started writing history, God told me, here's what he told me how to write it. Read the past, but live in the present. Read all about it, but live in the present. Know about your past accomplishments, but live in the doing of the now. The pressing of the day's command. That's faith. Faith is not just remembering. I remember when. I got memories too. I was a young little guy who all said I should not make it because my mom was divorced. I was raised by a grandmother and a mother, and I was weird because I prayed in tongues out loud and you could hear me. And I did all the things you should not do to be an acceptable, professional, Pentecostal preacher. I come along and do everything opposite and make it. And create anger for some of my elders because I had bigger crowds than they did. I didn't know how to count in those days. You got to add an extra 1,000 for every 10. You know how preachers count. The biggest lie in the church is numbers. But they got mad because I sold all the books, and they called my publisher one day and said, you know, if you keep publishing Liardon's books, we're not going to write any more books for you. Is this Harrison House or Liardon House? Thank God. They said, we're going to keep publishing him. I was their bestseller. They couldn't get rid of me. I was their youngest and their bestseller. I sold 8 million VHS copies of The Generals the first time I ever did any TV work. I was scared of cameras. And I rented a studio and went in and did them in 2 days, real fast, because I didn't know what else to do because I was scared of the camera. Sold 8 million of them. I didn't know what that meant until the check came. When an $8 million check, video royalty checks come to you, you feel like Abraham. I made it, I made it, I made it, I made it. I can live in that memory. I can live in the memory that I built a church at 26. They said it was one of the top 100 fastest growing church at that time. I shouldn't do it because I was too rude as a pastor. Gotta be nice and soft and speak cleanly. You can't do that to California people. They're crazy. California people, brain only works about half a day. I know we have a bishop here, and I was on down south of him. I love California people, but they're all unique, especially now. They need more help. Weird was then, but weirdest is now. But if you can build a church in California, you can build it anywhere in the world. At least they came to church. They'd come to church ready to go to the beach. They'd come with that stuff on their nose, in their swimsuit with the surfboard on their car. I thought, at least they came to church. I didn't complain about that. I could sit there and do all the memories and go, at 45, I had done everything on my list to do that I wanted to do as a young man. I did it. See, all these things you can, I did it. I woke up at 45 thinking, what do I do now? I've already met all the presidents I wanted to meet, been in the White House, met the star. I did it all. Had the plane, the jet, the car. I had it all. Everything I saw my fathers do, I did. All done by 45. 45. 45. Not 85, 45. I wasn't dead, I was half alive. At 45. 45. How old are you? And I could sit there and talk about all the nice things. One of the greatest enemies to a life of faith is your present successes. I'll say that again for you to write it down. One of the greatest problems that you have to face is your present successes will rob you of your future successes. If you sit there and look at it too long and talk about it too long. At 45, I had a come to Jesus day with me, Jesus, and my age. I had money in the bank account, everything I wanted, shiny shoes, nice suits, clothes, everything I wanted. already bored. Boredom is the place where sin occurs. When David was bored on the rooftop, he found Bathsheba and became a murderer, all in one chapter. Wow. In one chapter. When Noah got bored, he got drunk and got naked. He built the boat and then got naked and got drunk. It's amazing when you read the story of great people that right after their great accomplishments, they do the most stupidest stuff you can ever imagine because they need to know what the next command is. What is faith, Abraham? Keep living on the next command of God. Abraham would go and say, I built altars everywhere I went. What is faith? The ability to worship God at any moment. He actually, if you go through his life, he was an altar builder all the way through. Where's the last time you built an altar? Well, you may not actually do it like Abraham does with stone and wood. But where is your altar? Maybe your altar is that you come to the church and you clean it with your wife and your 6 kids. Nobody knows that every Saturday you come to the Lord's house and you offer your Saturday with your family in that particular way. Or maybe you go and you help and do something else. You build an altar to God that no one needs to know but you and God. Where's your altar at? Where do you do what is a sacrifice honorable for God's receptivity? One of my altars is I preach for small churches.